The House will come to order. Members, we are on third reading of House File 2310, discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I appreciate this second chance at the wheel here. So it was early in the session when I received a text message from Representative Jordan informing me that the Environment Committee needed somebody to be the new tree lady. And she was wondering if I would be interested in being the tree lady, which of course I said yes to. That's the kind of question I love to receive. And I said yes. And now cut to however many months later, and I think to the surprise of many people in this chamber or outside of it, I would say that I have spent the most time in my first year as a legislator talking about trees. I have talked about trees in more meetings with more people than I have talked about any other bill that I have authored, I would have you know. And I've learned a lot. And I just want to say, I want to express my appreciation to Chair Hansen, who allowed me to become that tree lady with a great deal of responsibility. And especially as it comes to the emerald ash borer, which is a very complicated, very statewide problem. It's a problem that affects all of our districts. It's a problem that needs to have a clear and coherent response. And it's a problem that we simply have never had one for. So I'm really grateful to you, Representative Hansen, for entrusting me with that problem. And the answer to that problem is going to be, we are going to cut down a lot of trees. A lot of trees in Minnesota. There are more ash trees in Minnesota than anywhere else in the country. Every one of our districts, every one of our main streets are going to see the impact of that beautiful bug. It's actually quite a beautiful bug. Which brings me to the second half of most of the work I did in environment, which was planting. It's always a good day to plant more trees. And this bill makes historic investments in tree planting programs across the state. We've done a great job of making sure that what we're doing is benefiting everyone in every district in this body. And I think it's important to take a note to sort of recognize that we all want our trees. We all want our tree planting dollars to come and plant trees in our towns, in our communities, because everybody likes trees and we want them. And you know, we hear a lot of things about this bill already in our debate about what should or should not be happening in whose communities, whether or not we're improving the bill or making the bill worse by providing something to one community and not the other community. And, you know, I'm going to be honest and say that this bill is going to leave this chamber worse than it came here. By striking the MPCA, we are not protecting those who need protecting. When I think about the work we're doing, I start with a simple question. Are we helping the people who need help the most? If we strike the MPCA Citizens Board, we are not helping the people who need help the most. If we strike the odor and air toxin reporting mechanisms in this bill, we are not helping people who need help, people in my communities. Odor and air toxins are a huge problem in my district, and this would have helped us, and we're cutting it out of the bill. By limiting the cumulative impacts in the way we are not helping greater Minnesota. We are not helping our greater Minnesota communities or our tribal communities. Every Minnesotan deserves these protections, just like every Minnesotan wants more trees in their community. We can see the benefits of a tree in a way it brings us all, or not all, but probably, hopefully most of us, great pleasure and joy to be surrounded by trees. But it also needs to recognize that what we are doing is going to make many of our communities struggle more. We are not helping them by making this bill weaker. And I really just want to strongly point out that This bill is strong, and I support it. But I'm supporting it less now than I was a few hours ago because we are making it worse, and that's really hard. So I don't want us to leave without recognizing that. But we will fight on. We will fight on with Representative Hansen, Chair Hansen at the helm. We will take another opportunity to make all of our communities stronger. And in the meantime, we will have a lot more trees when we do it. Thank you.
Further discussion to House File 2310. I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Scraba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a big bill. Thank you, Representative Hansen, for tolerating my first committee. I learned a lot. It's good. I'm new, but one of the things that I campaigned on were these big omnibus bills, and I'm not a fan. It's something that really, there's got to be a better way to do this, because inside this bill, there's good and there's bad. And I'd like to vote on the good and I'd like to vote on the bad separately, but instead we have to vote on it as one. And I'm really disappointed. One of the things this bill does that's bad for me is it raises fees. We have a $17 billion surplus. I thought we could have figured out how to hold off the fees for a while, put it down the road if we have to at all, but right now they're going up. In 2023, in the general fund appropriations, there's about $370 million in the environment bill. This one spends more than $1 billion. That's a lot of money, folks. That's a lot of money and it's got to come from somewhere. But one of the key issues for me is the lowland conifer carbon reserve. This takes land out of the school trust and sets it aside as a carbon reserve where logging will no longer be on school trust land for spruce, tamarack, white cedar. There are businesses in northern Minnesota that rely on those trees to survive. There's a rather large one in Grand Rapids that uses a lot of spruce. I've spoken to land managers, I've spoken to loggers, county land managers, and I have yet to find one that says, hey, this is a good deal. This is not a good deal for northern Minnesota. Unfortunately, it sets aside this carbon reserve, but it takes away from people's enjoyment of their livelihoods. And it does take away the school trust, the permanent school trust, the gift that keeps on giving. It buys it out so that you can't cut trees this year and then in 50 years come back and harvest them again. The DNR commissioner is going to designate these areas, where they are and when. And for me in the bill, where's the science? We have silviculturists that go to school to do this. And I truly believe that they know how to manage the forest better than we do. And I'm hoping that this does change so they have the ability to do that. One of the biggest issues, again, for me, is the school trust lands that generate monies to help school districts in Minnesota. They set aside money for our future, for our children. And this takes that away, this constant cycle of giving. Northeastern Minnesota is made up of a lot of public land. And I'm proud of it. I think we all are proud of it. Every time we start locking land up and not using it, we take it away from someone. We take it away from the use. I grew up in the era of pre-1978, the Wilderness Act, and we used to use the woods as we will, and now we don't anymore. We use it regulating. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it changed the culture. So if we do this, if we keep taking and taking, we keep concentrating people in an area, it's not getting bigger, folks. You're making it smaller, and it shouldn't be smaller. It should be bigger. There should be room for everyone to come up there. And I encourage people to come up there to see this, but this bill, the way it's written right now, is going to be really hard for me to support. And Representative Finke, Minnesota is made up of 14.7 billion trees. It's 35% of our state. And I have to say that our land managers that are doing that are doing a great job of doing it. And I hope they stay in there. I hope they can keep this school trust land giving so kids don't have to figure out how they're going to pay for their schools. This land could be good. And I've urged folks to vote against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, I'd love to just take a peek at licensed boating fees. If we start looking at section 33, line 210.8, when we start breaking down the size of a watercraft, I'd be curious how many in the room here have a boat, canoe. All right, I love the show of hands. Love it. All right, kayaks, paddle boards. Did you know that you need a license for your stand-up paddleboard? So even, what was that? Oh, yachts. Okay, David's has a yacht. All right. We're gonna go for a ride on his yacht. And when we start looking at this, I understand as we're breaking it down from sailboards to paddleboards, rowing shells. And the increases in the fees are astounding. $6.6 million increase in revenues per year on our license fees. And some of us, again, that had our hands in the air in the room here would have no troubles paying 100% more for your fee every year to go get your license for your canoe, your kayaks, things like that. But there's folks that aren't in the room that would have issue with it. So I'm curious if the DNR is going to have issue this year and how many citations, or this next year, how many citations may go out, because they're going to have to start monitoring a little bit more heavily these tags from our veterans to elderly, those with fixed incomes. And my hope, is that we can sit in conference committee and solve some of these problems and take these hikes off the docket. With this surplus that we have, it's a time when we can not add to folks in Minnesota. And again, I believe that the resources that we have here from our lakes, rivers, streams, and our woods, trails, parks, all the different things that we get to enjoy here in Minnesota, I think about those also that are renting out these products and these things to make memories on the lake in Minnesota. So also, let's talk about fishing license fee increases. 4.7 million revenues in fiscal year 24, and it's gonna bump up to 7.4 million in each year after. So growing government by 9% now with this taxes that are coming out here. Is this what we want to do here in Minnesota? I'm not sure. I'm grateful. Again, I want to say thanks to just the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. It's been very educational. It's been a real enjoyment to kind of look through different lenses and see different people's perspectives on climate change, on equity, equality, all the things that we keep hearing here. I've been blessed to learn a lot more. And it's not just greater Minnesota and Metro. It's just what is our goal here in Minnesota? And I believe that we want, and we've seen this in the last couple of years, how many more people use their bicycles in the room? How many more people got out, did things outside because it was encouraged, right? Versus staying indoors. And because things were mandated to shut down. So I'd like to take a moment to thank our stakeholders, taxpayers, just our constituents for the emails, phone calls, who got hundreds of them, I bet somebody in the room got more than I did, but I'm grateful for the ones that did get a hold of me. And again, just for the meetings that we've had on House File 2310, again, going back to conference committee, these are unrealistic fee increases, seeing over 100% in raising our fees. So I'm going to wrap up by saying this bill is better. It is going to leave this floor better because we are taking into consideration all of Minnesota. But I believe that we can do more to it, and I look forward to getting to work on it. And if you have any questions for me anytime, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you so much. Vote no.
I recognize the member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And today I want to, again, just represent the agricultural part of this bill. Coming from an agricultural district, and also both my husband and I growing up on farms, this is really an important part of our economy that we just cannot deny, we cannot forget about it. And as we are pushing forth with our energy bills, of course, we all want clean, carbon-free energy that's affordable, reliable, and safe. But we also want to be making choices that are not negatively impacting our huge industry, which is our agricultural industry. Now, here's the thing. When we are subsidizing the solar in these areas, when we're subsidizing wind, we are taking good, tillable, rich, black farmland out of production. Every acre that we take out of production, that is farmland, is equivalent to 185 bushels of corn. You can Google in Indiana, I just like to use this example because it's very easy to find this, but right now in the United States, the biggest solar farm is going in Indiana. And that is 13,000 acres. 13,000 acres of agricultural land that is coming out of production. And I like numbers, and that acreage, 13,000 acres, is going to fuel energy for 275,000 homes in Indiana. So it's very easy to start to do the math. If 13,000 acres of solar fuels 275,000 homes, and here in Minnesota, we have 2.2 million homes, we can start to see the numbers that we would have tens of thousands of agricultural land that's going to be taken out of production. And that is something, members, that we need to be cognitive of. We need to understand. Also, this is not an all or nothing. We can put solar and we can do wind in other areas. We could legislate that today, and unfortunately, that was turned down. When solar investors are coming into our areas, they are driving up the prices of land. This is driving up the prices of farmers to do business. I've heard members talk about they want to help startup farmers. They want to help that next generation of farmers. And yet that is not happening by your actions here today. You are not making startup costs for farms affordable for new farmers to get into the business. That's not happening. When solar investors buy the land, typically they are not local to the area. These are big investors, industrial investors that are buying the land that are most likely even out of state. There also is a cost to the local economy in rural districts because when you have an acre of land that's being farmed, there's obviously cost that's going towards seed, that's going to fertilizer, And when that farmer has that land with their profits, they buy locally. They buy tractors, they buy equipment, they buy vehicles, they buy trucks. So the farming industry is much more than that agricultural that I said we're fifth in agriculture. The farmers very much are keeping many of our rural districts in greater Minnesota going. Our schools are open and they are being funded by farmers. When you hurt farmers, and you really are, by putting so much money into subsidizing solar, that we are having huge investors coming and buying our farmland, that is a problem for greater Minnesota. So today, I rise again for farmers. I rise today for our agricultural business, our economy, that seems that it's been forgotten. I don't know where the disconnect has come here, but I don't know if it's just a generation. We maybe have to go back to our grandparents, and I would say probably almost everyone in this room, if you went back a couple of generations, grandparents were farming. So I don't know if we have just gone so many years away from people farming that there is a complete disconnect. But everything that you have, everything that you purchase, is coming from the land. It is coming from farming, or it is coming from mining. And it is disappointing to see that we, as the Minnesota State Legislature, which is supposed to be looking out for the entire state of Minnesota, that we truly are leaving farmers and the future of them out of the equation on this bill. So tonight, even though I have spent the last 14 years of my life trying to promote environmentally friendly practices through my sales business, promoting healthy lives, using less toxic chemicals, that's actually what I do for a living. Tonight, I will be voting against this environmental and energy bill because of the wasteful spending and because we can do much better for Minnesota. Vote no.
I recognize the member from Winona, Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it's my belief that everyone on both sides of the aisle on our environmental committee they truly want to do the right thing for our environment. And it's just that the approaches are really quite different. So in Winona County, I've sat on almost countless different environmental committees and water resource boards in the 10 years that I've been county commissioner. And with that, I learned that the carrot approach really is much better than the stick approach. And in Winona County, we've made great strides on protecting our environment, and it was all through willing participation. And speaking of willing participation, the part of the bill that singles out the sale of land and previously had required that it received a county board approval, in this bill, that county board approval has been removed. And I can tell you that that's really not a very good idea at all. And as a county board member, if we had, say, a township road or a county road that needed to be transferred to a township, we certainly wouldn't assert our authority over the township and simply tell them how things are going to be. We did everything we could to work together with that township to make that transition happen. And it's really the same with the state to a county. They should be fostering willing participation, which certainly isn't what they're doing here. The DNR doesn't support this legislation, and neither do the counties. This kind of policy breaks down good relationships that have been fostered through years of working together and replaces those good working relationships with resentment and distrust. Government overreach and distrust is a problem on many different levels. A second issue in my county is emerald ash borer. Winona County was the first county in the state of Minnesota more than a dozen years ago to experience the emerald ash borer invasion. And I can give you detailed examples of government ash borer policies that drove thriving businesses out of business. Not only did the ash borer policies put people out of business, but the quarantines and government intervention didn't help the situation. No amount of government spending is going to help in Minnesota any more than it did in any other state that's had to deal with this issue. It only serves to strain the taxpayer even more. Furthermore, how is this legislation fair to the counties that have already dealt with this situation? This legislation will put tax money into the problem for the remaining counties while leaving counties that were infested early on without help, thereby favoring one county over another. I learned long ago that we need to work together to bring Minnesotans both tax relief and regulatory relief. This bill goes in entirely the wrong direction. This bill pits rural communities against urban communities. It pits counties against the state. And worst of all, this bill will drive both citizens and businesses out of our state. Please vote no.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Energy is the single most important issue that we deal with. It is. It affects every single aspect of our life. When energy costs go up, everything is more expensive. Heating your home, building this desk, your car, literally everything. So we shouldn't be doing things that increase energy costs, but this bill is full of mandates that increase energy costs. And you might say, well, hey, we're saving the planet. And I actually do agree with you. We do need to make sure our energy is cleaner. We can do that without loading the bill up with mandates, and we have done that. We've made tremendous strides in reducing carbon emissions from the conversion of coal plants to natural gas. It's not all our solar fields. It's using natural gas combined with wind power, which wind power doesn't even need your subsidies. As you know, wind power is economically feasible, but it's not consistent. That's why it's important to pair it with natural gas, which leads to lower carbon emissions and lower energy costs, because nobody wants more coal plants. Coal plants have a lot of issues. They make people sicker. It gives us asthma. It's not ideal energy source. Natural gas, on the other hand, is fully adjustable. We can turn it on and off, and pairing that with wind power is what has led to our cleaner environment, not these green energy mandates. And it's not, I support green energy, and I support electronic vehicles as well. I actually was on 2 different waiting lists to try and buy an electronic vehicle this last year. 2 different waiting lists. And I ended up buying a Hyundai Santa Fe with 20 miles per gallon because I needed a car. And that's what's frustrating is it wasn't the cost, and even the subsidies in this bill don't necessarily even make electric vehicles affordable for the average person. You know, when a $50,000 vehicle is $2,500 cheaper, that really doesn't help the lower class at all. But why wasn't I able to get an electronic vehicle? Well, we all know it's the supply chain issues, because the materials we use to build these things comes from all over the globe. Very little of it comes from within our borders. So if we're serious about a green energy transition, if we want to move to a clean energy future, we should be getting these materials here at home. But then the other portion of this bill tries to make that more difficult. For the green energy transition, we literally need to double the global production of copper and zinc. We need to double it. And if we get that from abroad, not only does that come from dirty mining using child labor, but it also is unreliable, as we saw when we couldn't build enough EVs so I could buy one. So we need to be supporting these things here at home if we're serious about this green transition. And that's what I think that's the right thing for our country, is to move in that direction. It gives us cleaner air, and it can slow climate change by lowering our carbon emissions. But this isn't the way to do it. We need to do it here at home, because emissions done across the Atlantic are just as bad as emissions at home. We should be doing this here. Not only with copper and zinc, but we need 4 times the amount of chromium and 10 times the amount of graphite and lithium. That's just for transitioning to an electric vehicle infrastructure. We can't do this without doing it here. And if we truly want to transition, we want cleaner air, we want to lower our emissions, the other key outside of mining the materials at home is to build out our nuclear fleet. And this bill does virtually nothing to encourage nuclear in Minnesota. We're going to need a tremendous investment in nuclear in order to really bring us into the future that you all envision. And this bill doesn't do that. This bill, I would say, hurts our transition because it makes energy more expensive. And building these EVs and bringing this faster than the market can bear doesn't help us reach it. And we know that this has been an issue globally. Germany is 10 steps ahead of us in this. They've built a tremendous amount of wind and solar energy production, but Germany is a cloudy and rainy place. It's not economical, it's not feasible. So the idea is they did it all with mandates, and now they're reactivating their coal plants. So we are blessed in this wonderful country with cheap and abundant natural gas. We don't need to get it from Russia. We also are blessed with a tremendous prairie and open plains that we can build wind energy infrastructure. We don't need mandates. We can do this with the free market. So I agree. Let's move to this clean energy future. We can do this and let the market lead the way rather than doing mandates that increase costs, that help rich people and not the lower class, and ensure that we have a future where energy is reliable, because energy is literally the most important issue. And it doesn't get enough attention, and then when it gets this kind of attention that just makes it more expensive, that's the opposite direction. We can be cleaner and we can be cheaper, so let's do that rather than making energy more expensive and helping rich people buy electronic vehicles.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by thanking Chair Acom for her leadership on putting this bill together. It's a great bill that comes at a really important time. Minnesotans in all corners of our state are increasingly being impacted by climate change, whether it be floods, droughts, wildfires, or even increased insurance premiums. A few weeks ago, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the top scientific body in the world on this issue, released a report pulling together the most up-to-date science into a short, plain language summary. The headline statements from this AR6 synthesis report was handed out to you about 15-20 minutes ago. Quoting from the report, "Adverse impacts from human-caused climate change will continue to intensify. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. There is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all." Heavy words. While the situation is challenging to say the least. I'm actually the most hopeful I've been in my 10 years of work in this space. And some of those reasons are that our federal government finally passed a law that meets the moment with the Inflation Reduction Act. Because of the 100% clean energy by 2040 law that we passed earlier this session. Because of other actions we're taking in many different budget bills this session, as climate change impacts all aspects of our society. And because of the great investments we're making in this bill. Minnesota, we are stepping up. And what we do here matters. We're going to do our part in reducing emissions, and we're providing leadership for others to follow. By the way, I want to point out what I'm going to call the clean little secret of climate change policy. It's that as we make these investments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the side benefits, the things that come along for the ride, are tremendous in and of themselves. We'll be making homes and buildings healthier, more comfortable, safer, and less expensive to live and work in. We'll be cleaning our air and water. We'll be stopping kids from having to breathe harmful diesel exhaust on their way to and from school. We'll be growing healthier food, and we'll be helping our cities, towns, counties, and residents to be ready for more of the extreme weather that we unfortunately know is coming. And we can and must make sure these benefits are especially focused on the least advantaged among us, as they have caused climate change the least, but are disproportionately feeling its impacts. So again, I want to thank you, Chair Acom, and I want to thank all the members of the Climate and Energy Committee. I thought it was a great session. I really enjoyed our discussions on both, and I appreciate the perspectives on both sides of the aisle, and that primarily we focused on solutions, not debating whether this issue is happening. So with that, I ask you all, vote green.
I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Meckland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to touch on a few things. I think kind of what Rep. West just said of how important energy is. I think balance is a very important word. And Chair Acom mentioned something earlier about a landowner, and it's not our place to tell a landowner what they can or cannot do with their land. There are times we do if it affects neighboring landowners or negatively affects other land values. There's a lot of people who have a lot of concern about some of these solar things. As far as I've read reports of dairy cattle producing less reproduction if they're nearby. Earlier we heard about this conversation about the wolves. You know, where I live, we never used to have bears in our neighborhood. We have several of them now. Local DNR talks about it's because of the wolf population driving the bear population further and further south. Again, balance. Rep. Gilman mentioned something earlier about thanking the stakeholders and the constituents. I actually want to apologize to them. I want to apologize to them because at a time when we have a nearly $20 billion surplus, we can't give the taxpayers anything back, but we can certainly increase their cost at every turn we do. Because as Rep. West said, everything energy drives all cost. Your food goes up, your clothing goes up, everything is shipped by fuel. So this is very, very hard for a lot of people to, I mean, I hear it all the time. The inflation is killing people. Our power is getting more and more expensive while we're trying to eliminate whether or not you can even have a gas range. You talked about making houses more energy efficient, more affordable. I work on these things every day. They have not gone down in the last 20 years. They keep going up. We are one of the highest states for housing. It's a sad day, and this is just one of many omnibus bills. It's going to get worse, people. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm really enjoying the debate on this bill because it's a really good bill. And I'm particularly grateful to Chair Acom and the strong leadership in our caucus focused on making Minnesota a leader in addressing the climate crisis by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, lowering the cost of energy, and doing it in a way that creates good family-sustaining jobs. I want to speak briefly on one of the provisions in the bill that I worked on, the provision setting up the Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority, a publicly accountable, mission-driven finance authority similar to a green bank in other states that will enable Minnesota to rapidly accelerate the adoption of proven clean energy technologies and do it with the interests of Minnesota families, our workers, and communities at the center as we transition to a clean energy economy. The Minnesota Climate Finance Innovation Authority, or MNCIFA for short, its essential objectives will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by addressing market gaps to address the financing of clean energy technologies. It will serve communities and markets that have been underserved and most impacted by the climate crisis. And it will ensure that our transition to a clean energy economy protects the rights of workers and consumers and creates good family-sustaining jobs for Minnesotans across the state. As the economic, the community, and the financial impacts of climate change grow, Minnesota must continue to accelerate our transition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and transition to a clean energy economy. This agency, MNCIFA, is a critical tool that will enable Minnesota to bring in hundreds of millions of federal dollars and leverage about $1 billion of private capital to invest in climate-friendly clean energy projects, starting in communities around the state and places where we need it most. We know there's already good work happening in Minnesota to facilitate clean energy and energy efficiency projects, much of which we've already talked about tonight. But there are still gaps, and there is a need to rapidly accelerate the scale and the scope of the work. There are projects that go unfunded, and there are needs that are not being met. From energy-saving projects around affordable housing properties to district energy project and enhanced energy efficiency for farmers. We will be following 17 other states with clean energy finance authorities who've used to date $2.5 billion in public funds to leverage $9 billion in total investments in clean energy technologies, nearly all from private lenders and investors. And the time to do this is now. Through the IRA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, there's $20 billion available to state-based entities like MNCIFA to support the deployment of clean energy technologies and emission-reducing technologies. This means that the investment of $20 million, for investment of $20 million, Minnesota's per capita share could be up to $350 million, and that we can leverage for significant and ongoing private investment in job-creating clean energy projects. As somebody who's worked a lot in the labor space, in the democracy space, working with our workers, I am particularly proud of the work that we have done to ensure that as we transition, we will be building good, strong, clean energy jobs that protect workers, that protect communities, and ensure that as we make this economic transition, we know that our economy and our workers will be stronger. This is a significant opportunity to leverage both state and federal dollars for private investment that expands the scale and scope of clean energy. This bill takes our obligation and the obligation seriously. It takes seriously what Representative Kraft talked about in terms of the urgency to address the climate crisis. I'm really proud of this bill. I'm proud of this provision. And I think Minnesota is on the forefront of leading, and this bill puts us there as that North Star. Members, I'd ask you to support the bill. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Mr. Speaker and members, thank you. It's been mentioned, but I want to talk about it from a practical perspective about increasing fishing license. None of us, outside of myself, will hear from people about how they are going to be so dissatisfied with fishing license. When you own a hardware store and they buy a license there, they don't like the license fees as it is right now, and this increase, they're not going to like it at all. And the funny thing is they're not getting any additional service out of it. Representative Murphy and I represent Otter Tail County, tremendous amount of lakes. And that brings economic prosperity to our smaller communities. You know, where I live, in Browns Valley, we have two of the top 10 largest lakes. And even though there's ice on the lakes this weekend, most likely because we still have our chilly weather here in Minnesota, at least on the western part, we get 2 weeks head start for Fisher opener. And that brings a lot of people into our community. Like my seatmate talked about here just recently in regards with these solar plats, that's what I call them. I really don't like calling them farms because they don't grow anything, not like what our agriculture industry does. But when these solar plats are developed, people don't shop at the local grocery store. They sure don't buy nuts and bolts at their local hardware store, I can assure you that, because they're getting it from a different supplier. So we've talked about the concerns in regards with prime farmland going to not in production for our agriculture. And that's not even yet getting into what do we do after 30, 40 years when this stuff becomes obsolete. And when you have a corporation that owns these lands out of Minnesota, it's very easy for them to declare bankruptcy and leave those panels and windmills to the responsibility of the county or the landowners. So some things that are very concerned about. I do want to talk about the drainage portal bill. First of all, I do enjoyed our continual visiting with Representative Purcell about this. And you're getting a handout passed out here. This is just flood events. The second page is a map. I did not take the time to count all the circles in 2019. Just like this weekend, we had a flood event in Traverse County. Myself and Commissioner Metz was sandbagging in the city of Dumont on Friday afternoon. But roads are being washed out, ditches are being washed out this year. This map here is of 2019, if you look at all the circles. Then if you start just paging through the pictures, these are just washouts. And I know I do appreciate visiting with Representative Purcell and just really learning what's important to her, but also sharing with her what's important to my landowners. And currently right now, how the drainage portal bill reads, because when you start looking at these pictures, if you don't see these type of washouts, this is a repair. And if you look into the bill, it could be easily misinterpreted, especially by the standards that some of the environmental organizations follow, that this is not a repair. And a lot of times, even with repairs, the county just does it, or the township. Because like I have shared, I think it's the second and third picture, those are township roads. As an EMT, we travel township roads to get to farms. If you look on the third picture, there's a farm site on that third picture in Traverse County. These are washouts just because of we're flat out there. You can see 5 miles away a dog walking across the prairie. That's how flat we are. So these are just some of the concerns that I have in the definition of the drainage portal. Also, the order work for repairs has to, how I interpret it, has to wait for someone else to okay it, where a lot of times the landowners, now the landowners out in our neck of the woods don't disagree that everybody should have the right to look at what's being fixed. That's not the argument. It's who's making that decision. That's the concern. And if we're slowing down these type of repairs, because a repair, for example, is just putting it back to working order. But how about if we look at one of these pictures and we find that we can do a little deeper ditch there and it wouldn't wash out? Well, that's a modification. Does that mean a group, which on this place would be upstream, because this stuff runs into the Red River Valley, doesn't run into the Mississippi, do they slow that project down because they didn't see these pictures? They didn't go out and look at them. Also, right now, a concern that I have, and Representative Purcell and I talked about this graciously, that if Bowser is going to put together these portals, fine. Not a problem with that. But then let's not have duplicate government services where the watershed districts have to do the same. That's a waste of funds, waste of resources, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. Not really on the same land, I guess we could say. We want clean water, and we know if we look at these pictures, if this don't get fixed, we're not having clean water. We're going to get more settlement into the ditches, and we're also going get back up into the farmland, and that's going to cause other problems down to Lake Traverse, where most of this water runs into. So I'm looking forward to continuing on this. I do hope that the drainage portal bill is not accepted in conference, and Representative Purcell and I have the opportunity to work through this further to create a win-win situation for everybody. So those are just some of the reasons that I won't be supporting this bill. Others have been mentioned by other colleagues on this side of the aisle. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So HF 2310, this is a good bill. I was honored to carry the very popular Solar for Schools bill this year. And a big shout out to former Representative Jean Wagenius, who had it. She was a champion for the Solar for Schools program, and I know Chair Patty Acomb was also a champion for this program. There were so many schools that wanted to participate that they ran out of money. So now we're going to invest $65 million in solar and storage, expanding this very popular program. We're also investing in heat pumps. I know Representative Finke talked about the trees. There's a ban on PFAS in household products. Lots of great stuff in this bill. And Minnesota is a state that has to import fossil fuels. We don't have our own fossil fuels. We have to import it from out of state or out of our country. Why not harness our own power? Why not make it here? We've got wind, we've got solar. Why not make it here? I'm very thankful to the authors, to Representative Hansen, to Representative Patty Acomb for working on this. I appreciate all the work that was put into the committees. I was lucky enough to be on the Climate, Energy, Policy, and Finance Committee. That was a great committee to be on. And granted, there's more that we can do, but this is a really good start. And I just want to say to Chair Acomb, she called this a win-win. I'm going to call it a win-win-win-win-win. Because there are so many wins in this bill. So one of the first wins will be our students will be able to learn about solar firsthand. They'll have it on the rooftops. They'll be able to see how solar is powering their schools. And the schools will be able to save money with this solar power. They'll be able to save on their electricity costs. The buildings that use solar are going to save money because we will be able to control, we can't control the oil market. We can control solar and wind a lot more than we can control the oil market. It's a win for our environment. It's a win for jobs. I don't know if people realize this, but Minnesota companies installed half of all wind turbines nationwide in the last decade. So we have a thriving, robust wind and solar industry right here. That's a win. Xcel Energy is building Sherco Solar. We'll be creating 900 union jobs. That's a win. And lastly, Minnesota farmers. Down in southwestern Minnesota, I keep saying this, I've seen the map where it shows the wind patterns in the nation. And if you look at southwestern Minnesota, we have a high potential for wind down there. And that's why when you drive down, or if you live down there, you see all the wind turbines. You go to Iowa, there is so much potential for wind there. Why not harness that? And for farmers, I just want to say there are a lot of small family farmers who are really struggling. And if they're able to put solar panels on their farms, if they're able to install a wind turbine, that helps diversify the income they're getting. Something I read that I hadn't heard before, they say wind energy has been called the new corn for struggling farmers. And now solar fields are increasingly allowing farmers to export a new product from their land in a long-term and sustainable way. In fact, lease payments from wind and solar can mean the difference between keeping a farm in the family or selling off the land or under-investing in the operation during tough years. It allows farmers to continue their farming operation uninterrupted with the added benefit of dependable revenue. So I see a lot of wins here. Win, 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 win. Many wins. So please vote green. I will be. Thank you.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. You know, I sat here and listened to all the amendments and all the different pieces of this bill, and while there's some great things, I agree, in this bill, we are a state that has 10,000 lakes. We need to also be a state of 10,000 new jobs, 10,000 new entrepreneurs, 10,000 more people moving into this state instead of moving out of the state. And I have great concerns on what the features of this bill are really going to do. There are some really significant unintended consequences to all the things that sound great. Minnesota has a population of probably 5.6 million, and I believe the world population is like 7.8 billion. So as important as we all think we are in this room, we are like 0.01. That's what we are. And we're making policies that are going to have an effect on every single one of those 0.01 people in Minnesota that are going to be monumental, more than the impact we're going to have on the environment, whether we believe it or not. Because as I speak, the portfolio is being diversified in Europe. They're reversing some of their practices. They're using coal. They're using natural gas. They're going to understand hydro, nuclear, a diversified financial portfolio. I bet most of you on the other side have that and understand that. But we have mandated 100%, and I'm all for clean air and water. I live in northern Minnesota. I enjoy it every day, and I don't ever not want that. But to expect 100% when the rest of the world isn't doing it and understands why, because their people will perish. Their economy will perish. If that happens, this 0.01% that we make a difference of, what have we done in this body? So for me, I want clean air. I want clean water. But along with that, I also don't want the unintended consequences to decimate our schools because the costs are going to be higher for everybody. I'm having school districts. I've actually had county administrators reach out, city leadership. These costs are going to have unfunded mandates that are going to affect all their bottom lines, and it's everybody in the state, that 0.01% of the world population, they're all going to pay 100% of the tax hikes. And we don't have people moving into this state. We say we're a great state, but we still have issues to fix. We need to get our economy going. So I look at the hardships and I go, you know what? When do we do 100% mandates and anything else? I don't see us taking care of seniors 100%. I don't see us doing anything. We don't have 100% perfection in education, in public safety, and in caring for seniors, the anchors of our community. But we're going to set up a brand new entity and do 100% mandate on something as serious on how we're going to heat our homes, heat our businesses, and make sure we can fuel our economy. So, and on top of that, we're going to take the land and just beautify it with a bunch of solar panels when we are the 4th exporter in Minnesota for farming, agriculture. Look up here. Look at the state symbol. We've done farming in Minnesota. I grew up on one. Soybeans, corn, cows, pigs. That's Minnesota. And we've spent millions on programs to feed, make sure we have food shelves, school lunches. Where are we going to get our food? This just seems to me to be absolutely backwards. And then what are we going to pay people to give up their land for solar panels? We're not going to do nuclear, but we're going to do solar panels. Give up our land, which we have prime real estate for land, for farming. So as somebody that grew up on a farm, my grandpa would say this is hogwash. He'd say this is short-sighted thinking, Minnesota. We grow food in Minnesota, and we need a diversified energy portfolio. I just drove back in a blizzard at the end of April. And I just saw the wolf 2 days ago, too, at the edge of my property. So it's cold up here. We can't afford blackouts. And Minnesota has way more common sense this. So for these reasons, as much as I agree with you, we can have clean air and clean water, and we have it. And we can keep moving forward, and we don't have to have an all or none mentality. It doesn't have to be all electric vehicles, no fossil fuels. That's absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't even make any sense in 2023. We can't go back to a lantern. I don't think anybody on the other side wants to drive a horse. I'd enjoy it, but you might not like it so much. But when we can't get the supplies we're used to, and we don't want to mine for all the things we need to do the solar panels, but we're going to try to rely on other countries, it's short-sighted thinking. And for those reasons, members, vote no.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start out letting the hundreds of people that have contacted me on these issues. One thread that's been pretty heavy is millions in new taxes and fees. Why aren't we using the surplus to pay for these things? Another big thing is mandates that drive up the costs of energy. Well, the rich can afford, but I've got retired farmers, teachers. I've got young families that they're having trouble with inflation and the added costs that the mandates we have in this bill will further punish. This is a regressive burden on our lower income families and people. I want to get a good thing, so I'm going to talk about Amendment A48, increase the punishment for people doing horrible things to animals. I just wish we had increased the punishment for people doing horrible things to our children and to human beings. Now, some of the comments that have been going along, oh, I forgot, a lot of you from home contacted me about Save Our Planet. Well, being a science guy, the planet means the planet. So things that we can do better here, we should do here. Because frankly, manufacturing, mining, we do a better job, less polluting, less harmful to the environment. And China, well, for a long, several years now, they've been building a lot of dirty coal facilities, coal plants, at times one a week. So when we don't do the manufacturing here, not in our backyard, they do it in China, and they power it with low-cost, dirty coal. Well, if you want to save the planet, don't ship that stuff, as in the jobs, the activities, to China. Keep them here, because we can do it better, cleaner, and the real nice thing, instead of all those ships spending weeks and weeks coming from China to bring goods to us, we build it here. We don't have all of that energy consumed in transport. So when we talk Save Our Planet, think on a planet-wide level. An hour meant that my amendment wasn't offered for the new kinds of nuclear power. What I wanted to do is, in Minnesota, we should do what and push what is good for Minnesota. I heard someone say, we don't produce, petrochemicals in Minnesota. But if we did the new high pressure, high temperature, modular nuclear generation, we do have in those casks spent nuclear material, spent fuel that would be used to fuel those new types of nuclear generation. I've talked to the people in Prairie Island and other parts that would love to get rid of that spent fuel. So if we're going to, in a previous bill, $100 million to push for grants for clean energy, why don't we target what's going to be best for Minnesota, which is targeting getting rid of those casks of spent fuel, converting it into the fuel that's in these new nuclear generation facilities that we could help design and build, carbon-free, decreases something we want to get rid of in the state, and as that's generating power, it's consuming and decreasing the amount of radioactive waste material. Let's get smart. I heard a lot of people talk about trees. Do you know one of the best ways to store carbon? Log cabins, wood floors, wood furniture, because that stores carbon. And good forest management, which we have, decreases the chance of wildfires. Those large wildfires produce more carbon, more toxic, stuff in our air than the cars we drive. So it's a win-win. You take and you carbon out, store it in beautiful furniture, floors, buildings, that we need that type of stuff. And then we plant new, and we continue that process of pulling carbon out and making it useful. And again, not so much for transportation in Minnesota. We don't have to ship away for synthetic stuff that's made who knows where. So let's get smart about what is best for Minnesota by doing some of the tweaks. There was a comment about 0.5% of farmlands being used for solar. Do you know if we go to 100% solar cars, we're I think less than 2% of our total vehicles. We would have to increase, I believe it's over 30% of our electricity that we're consuming. So if we're going to go 100% by 2040 in a few decades, we're going to have to accelerate the amount of solar. So we're going to have to go 10, 20, 30% more, or we're going to have 20. I should say better. We're starting with less than 1%. We're going to have to go to 10, 20, or 30% of that acreage to be able to generate the electric power that we're going to need, because we're also going and ramping up the EV. We didn't want to go and say, hey, we're going to promote hydrogen and some of the other alternative fuels instead of EV because, wow, EV's the golden child. But you talk to a farmer in ag and rural areas where they have times of the year where they're running steady, day in, day out for harvest. They're harvesting, they're shipping their crops. You can't every few hours switch out to a new vehicle, to a new combine, etc. By promoting fuel cells, and hydrogen, we're being smart for what Minnesota needs, because we need a portfolio of clean, right? So electric might be good for some things, but fuel cells, nuclear, we've got to understand what will work in Minnesota. And this bill isn't quite getting us to where we need to be. Dodge County was brought up, but before I touch on that Dodge County, we can do better with this bill. We can minimize the effects on agriculture and our farmers. And a lot of hardworking people and communities depend on agriculture. I've talked with a lot of county water and soil officers, county commissioners, etc., about what are the issues. That's why I did the amendments. Dodge County, I represent. And Dodge County came up with some really good planning, zoning, and other things, but because we're bundling a bunch of small solar farm things, they're below the megawatt or whatever limit you put onto it, they don't have a choice. They know better what is good for their area. They're the ones that in the springtime have to worry about the floods and the other issues. They're the ones that know the actual reality of their county, their neighbors. How many people here, you've got a lot of discussion about riverbanks, about farmers have these drainage ditches. There are a lot of things that the counties know better than the PUC. And frankly, we need to let them in on it. The other thing about Dodge County, there's big talk about windmills being big in Minnesota. I believe one of the largest, if not the largest, manufacturer of wind turbines is in Dodge County. They ship around the nation. I believe they ship around the world. And, frankly, we should invite them to testify about the, particulars. Have the people in Minnesota involved help create some of this. Now, we heard texting. All the solar people are texting me that there's no problem. If you want to actually talk to people that have seen the problems caused by poor planning and ignorance of the drainage and the effects, I can get them to you. I'll get you in contact with them. So I don't know what solar, maybe the people that suffer through the ramifications of the projects are maybe a little more honest than the people that are getting wealthy from them. So we should listen to the people that are actually impacted by our policies and our mandates. So I'm going to sit down because I've said what I was told by the people and passed it on. I said and let you know about what I understand from my district and some of the major players in wind. There's a huge solar facility that's going in down in my district. So I've had those conversations with citizens and the people impacted. I'd like to have those conversations with you. I wish we could have done it before this is passing off the floor. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Mr. Speaker and members, tonight we are chasing more of that expensive agenda here in Minnesota, the agenda that results in $9 billion worth of tax increases, and in this bill, new fee increases for many, and a business climate in Minnesota that is uncertain for future investment. And that, members, is a true travesty for future investment and jobs in this state. This is an anti-jobs bill, members, especially for the communities in the 7-county metro area. That's one thing that I'll talk about tonight. But further, I'm frustrated by terrible environmental policy that's found within this bill. So, members, it's important, we haven't talked yet about cumulative impacts and about what businesses have to go through in order to create jobs and make investments in this state. Yes, this bill improved with the amendment adopted earlier tonight. But I care about future job creators that want to invest in our state. And when you're looking at air permitting, cumulative impacts, that's not something, the way that this is written, that's going to be easy for businesses to work through. Earlier tonight, we talked about the way that the public should be engaged in our process, the way that the public should be engaged in their government, the way that the public should be engaged in the things in their community. But when you create a standard where a cumulative impact analysis, like is found in this bill, is going to impact many job creators, and I think about the fact that this bill, as amended, members, expands the scope for air permitting requirements, not just in the 7-county metro area, but in many regional centers across this state. I think about the city of Duluth. I think about paper mills. I think about certain industrial things around steelmaking that are all found in places like Duluth, who will have a harder time finding permits or getting reissued permits because of the uncertainty created under cumulative impact analysis in this bill. It's not something we should be chasing, and it's not just in one region. This is an issue that is going to impact regional centers across the state. So if you live in Mankato or the surrounding area, and you enjoy food processing or agriculture production, or you see other manufacturing spheres, it will be more difficult to get an air permit in this state because of this bill. And it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Thankfully, the amendment that we adopted earlier tonight centers the odor management standards to just the 7-county metro area. But at the same time, we are creating uncertainty for people who want to do business and employ Minnesotans in this state. I also sit on the Labor Committee, and we've heard about workforce standards that we want our state to adhere to. Well, what's going to happen when we make it so uncompetitive in this state for the places that you want to enhance these standards for? They're going to invest in other places because of regulatory uncertainty, because of the fact that even if they go through the process that's set out before them, the odor management plan or the cumulative impact analysis could result in them not having their permit. Why are we doing this, members? It shouldn't be this way. Much is discussed in this body about the proper way that we engage the public, the way that we engage stakeholders, the way that we bring about consensus in this body for the people of Minnesota. Which is why this bill should not contain the language related to the drainage registry portal. For those of you who don't know, there is a drainage work group that meets once a month and has all of the stakeholders at the table for a 3-hour meeting once a month to engage on the issues surrounding water and drainage in our state. And what this bill says with this language, that we're just gonna lift the table and throw up the cards in the air. And why? Why? Because you don't want to see further investment in our state, because you want to go after farmers in this state. That's what the drainage registry portal does. I certainly hope that that finds its way out of this bill through conference committee. Members, then we have members of this body engaging in a regulatory process for an area of the state that they don't represent and trying to tell us how to live our lives, what we can do and what we can't do. That's what's included in the Lowland Conifer Carbon Reserve. Is Representative Purcell on the floor? I can't quite see. Well, I hope that she's able to find her way back because I have a number of questions as it relates to the Lowland Conifer Carbon Reserve. But I have a little bit to say here. So this bill contains $5 million for this carbon reserve, and it will go about locking up the natural resources that help fund our schools in this state, the school trust funds. And this bill provides $5 million for this particular section of the bill. But let me tell you, after talking to the people in northern Minnesota, it's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that our schools are going to lose out on because of a land grab known as the Lowland Conifer Carbon Reserve. It doesn't have to be this way. Would Representative Hansen yield to a question?
Representative Hansen will yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hansen, without Representative Purcell on the floor, I hope that you'll be able to just answer a question here related to the Lowland Conifer Carbon Reserve. Do you have a map that you could share with members to understand what area of the state this particular language would impact?
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Schultz. I do not have a map here.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hansen. I know that this was a part of our discussion in committee this year, and I believe that the DNR kind of provided an understanding for us. But for the members of this body, this is critically important for us. This bill locks up proper forest management and mineral exploration in northeastern Minnesota. The very things that are the key economic drivers to northeastern Minnesota. It's offensive. It's absolutely offensive. The Lowland Conifer Carbon Reserve, from the conversations that I've had, and if you don't understand the language already, it's meant to stop the cutting of trees that are over 90 years old. There's a lot of them in northeastern Minnesota. But while you can't do that, and you can't use proper forest management techniques, you also can't reach the minerals beneath the surface. So, the only minerals that you're able to currently reach are the ones that currently have a permit. So the operations that currently have a permit. So any future project, whether in the next 5 years, whether in the next 50 years, or hundreds of years from now, this locks away those minerals throughout northeastern Minnesota. This is an area that should absolutely be stripped from this bill, and a big reason I can't support it tonight. But let me also add why this is terrible environmental policy for our state. It also locks up peat mining ventures in our state. And if you didn't know, we have the great ability to do that in our state using the very resources we have, the natural resources that we have. And when we do it, do you know what it results in? Clean water. Something this bill is supposed to be about. But instead, nope, we can't do that. We can't use that to help clean our water. It's literally a water filtration system. a natural water filtration system. Terrible policy for our state. Minnesotans deserve better than this bill. This expensive bill that increases fees, adds to costs, creates regulatory uncertainty, and at the end of the day is anti-jobs. So with that, members, I urge a no vote on this bill tonight, and let's hope that this bill gets better.
I recognize the member from Nicollet, Representative Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and also thank you, Chair Hansen, for incorporating House File 1000 into the Environment and Natural Resources Bill. One of the biggest items in this bill is language and funding for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And for folks at home who may not know, the MPCA has a big job. They have a job to make sure Minnesotans have healthy air, healthy land, clean water, and a livable climate. It is our job as the legislature to guide them in their work. Together, we set the rules that dictate the pollution of the air and the water and the soil. And with the Department of Health, these agencies monitor water quality and work together on one of our most valuable life-saving resources, the water that is in Minnesota. And for those of you who were in the committees that House File 1000 went through, I was armed with data, and I gave each of the members of these committees data about what water quality looks like at the tap, where you at the intake rather, where you drink the water in your communities. And there were some communities who had not been tested yet. This is testing between the EPA and the Minnesota Department of Health. And there were other communities who were very alarming. Representative Cha had 10 different types of PFAS in your drinking water. I remember Representative Kraft had 10 in his as well. And there were some members who were shocked they had not even heard of PFAS in their drinking water when I went through these committees and talked about it. The Minnesota Department of Health has a website. It's an interactive website where you can actually dial in. You go to the website, you just type in what city you're looking for, and it'll tell you if it's tested and what types of PFAS there are. There's over 10,000 in the world, unfortunately. Many of them have negative health impacts. The DNR also does some research on PFAS, and they also talk about the impacts of fish and wildlife on humans. And so they inform us through advisories where to fish, what to eat, and where to eat, and that sort of thing. So for instance, there's an advisory in the state of Minnesota for smelt. Smelt is a fish that lives in the Lake Superior drainage basin, and I know a lot of Minnesotans, they do smelt. I know a lot of indigenous folks in Minnesota also rely on smelt for their food as well as a food resource. And unfortunately, we're in the time where these species that we rely upon are greatly impacted to the point where they actually negatively impact human health with consumption, hence the advisories. And so there's a website where you can go to actually find out which lakes are safe and which lakes aren't, and which fish are safe and which fish aren't. And it's really weird to me because when I grew up as a kid, we didn't have that stuff here in Minnesota, but we have it now. After this bill passes, we will also give the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency the tools and the guidance to help keep things like microplastics and PFAS out of the water, out of the land, and out of our bodies. This bill gives authority to the MPCA to ban non-essential uses of polyfluoral and perfluoral alkyl substances, also known as PFAS, also known as forever chemicals. You'll remember, for some of you that were here in past years, you'll remember a bipartisan effort in 2021 to ban PFAS in food packaging. That was something that was allowed to go across the finish line with a divided government. Fast forward to 2022, nothing got accomplished, unfortunately. I think part of it was, it was an election year, but also I think part of it was those folks that came to our committees to lobby all of us from Washington, D.C. and internationally also was working in 2022 as well here in Minnesota. But in 2021, something of significance also happened. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency drafted and released what was known as a PFAS blueprint to tackle problems of the forever chemicals that we have in our land, our water, yes, in our air, and also in our bodies. The first step in the three-pronged approach is to prevent. The second is to manage, and the third step is to clean up. Tonight, with this bill, we are going to work on the prevention. We're turning off the tap because the bathtub is overflowing. In Minnesota right now, there are 98 out of 110 closed landfills that are leaching PFAS into the surrounding groundwater. That's in my district across the river as well, and in other districts across the state. In fact, there's a map. You can actually go to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency website and find out that data. And some of that will be alarming to you if you hadn't known that before. We have to work together to find these solutions. And we have to find ways to clean up these issues that we have here in Minnesota. I want to point out to you 3 different articles. One is this: Minnesota drinking water widely contaminated with unhealthy levels of PFAS chemicals. This was from August of 2022. That was before the EPA actually issued new guidance, new rulemaking about what is safe in water and what is not safe in water. And for those of you who have been talking to your communities, most likely this updated information is kind of a shock and kind of alarming to some of your mayors and council members in the districts that you serve. The second article comes from WTIP, which is also North Shore Community Radio. This is up in Grand Marais. Minnesota agencies continue to investigate levels of toxic chemicals in Lake Superior fish. Yeah, smelt is one of them, but there are more. How many of you go up to Lake Superior every year, either in the winter or any of the seasons? You expect that place to be clean. You expect that environment to be clean and healthy. It's impaired, just like the rest of Minnesota, unfortunately, and also across the world. In fact, everybody here that's in the chamber, everybody at home that's listening, you more than likely have forever chemicals coursing through your body in your blood right now. Over 99% of the people of this world have forever chemicals in your blood. It's found in breast milk. It's found in infant cord blood. It's found in carpeting. It's found in furniture. It's found in food packaging. It's found in cookware. It's found in ski wax. Just about everywhere you look, you find it, including your blood. For firefighters that have to endure a fire, they have that stuff in their turnout gear. And for the folks that live in my district in St. Peter, they wear these pieces of turnout gear, they put them away, they wear their city clothes home, they put their city clothes in the washer and the dryer, and inadvertently also contaminate their whole entire family with PFAS. The same is the case for a lot of veterans who served in the military, because these forever chemicals are known to be found in firefighting foam. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight is a little bit of a challenge for me, because this has never really happened before in my career. But if you look at the gallery tonight, you'll see the Strandy family. Michael and Dana and Nora. There's one person that's missing from that family and one person missing from a chair up there, and that's Amara Strandy. a young woman in her 20s who fought a 5-year valiant fight with cancer, a rare form of cancer to many, but she comes from a place and in a district, in a world rather, where, I quote, cancer at Tartan High School has been so prominent that the usual high school cliques like jocks and nerds also includes cancer kids. Amara's wish was to see PFAS provisions in this bill passed into law. Tonight we have the ability to do so. I want to take a moment to honor Amara and her family. And I also want to point out the fact that everybody in this room, or most of the people in this room rather, are parents. And I know that every single one of us would do anything to protect our kids. We have a unique opportunity to do so tonight. The best way to handle a catastrophe is to prevent it in the first place. Amara's parents, Dana and Michael, and Amara's sister, Nora, do not get the chance to cast the green vote tonight. You do. With her remaining time on earth, Amara fought for her life and also for change in our committee hearings. She did everything within her power to prevent the catastrophe from happening to another person and another family. And tonight, I'm asking you to please vote green. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So we have a $17.5 billion surplus. And this bill makes life just a little bit more expensive for Minnesotans. In fact, in this bill, we recognize that life is going to be a little bit more expensive for Minnesotans if this bill were to be passed into law. This bill changes the definition of low-income household. It's expanded from 60% to 80% of median household income for the purpose of receiving energy assistance. So we recognize that more Minnesotans are going to be needing energy assistance in order to pay for their higher, expensive electricity bills. I also want to warn this body about doom and gloom on climate change. You know, at one point, northern Minnesota was covered in glaciers. The last glacier left Minnesota around 10,000 years ago. There was no cars. There was no fossil fuels. It was just those living on the land and the tools they had at their hand. Theo, this is in the UK news, was a teenager just shy of turning 20 years old. So despondent over the environment and climate change, because that's what he had been told for years and years and years, that if we don't do something, Theo took his own life. So I want us to be very careful as you talk about climate change, and we don't have much time, because it does affect the youth's mental health. Regarding PFAS, one I did not hear, is facial masks. Did you know that the facial masks that we were mandated to wear on our faces are covered in PFAS? So think about that one as you still wear your face mask, if you do. So this bill, as I was talking about being expensive, so we haven't funded nursing homes, very little money for long-term care there. But this bill provides plenty of tax dollars for various special interest groups and various wants We have $20 million from the general fund and $20 million from the RDA for Solar for Schools grant program. Now I want you to remember that there are children mining the minerals who will never ever have the opportunity to have an education. But they will be mining the minerals to make solar panels on schools. $20 million. We have another $1,138,000 from the general fund and another $1,138,000 from the RDA for installations at state colleges and universities outside the Xcel Energy's service territory. $45,133,000 to be exact from the general fund and $5 million from the RDA to install pre-weatherization measures at low-income residential buildings. And then $10 million from the general fund for heat pumps, which provide rebates up to $4,000 to supplemental grants available from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. Now, that Federal Inflation Reduction Act does absolutely nothing to alleviate the inflation. It is just a fun word that they came up with, an acronym that they came up with so that they could pass the new Green Deal. It was a scam, a sham, and guess what? We still have high inflation. But don't worry, you got some heat pump money in here. In fact, the Daily Mail, you know, you get a lot of real news out of the Daily Mail there. Actually, they report a lot of stuff happening in Minnesota, too, that you would never find locally. But back to the heat pumps. So there's an article dated April 14th, 2023, so not too long ago. What is today, the 17th? So what was that, 5 days ago? Yes, so the title is Britain's Heat Pump Flop. Rollout of the wretched 150 million euro boiler upgrade scheme branded embarrassing after missing installation's target. Now, I'm not going to read the entire article to you because you have the Google, you know how to look these things up and to read yourself. But in the article it says, critics say the pumps, which are typically placed outside at the back or side of a house, perform poorly in cold weather, especially if a home is inadequately insulated or the radiators are not big enough to give off sufficient heat. Yada, yada, yada. The scheme is simply a taxpayer handout to those who don't need it. It does little for carbon saving compared to investment on insulation. It does not help keep bills low. It takes from the poor and gives to the wealthy, and it is an embarrassment of a policy. Some more blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. A sensible approach to net zero involves allowing competition to provide green products that people actually want to buy because they work, rather than forcing upon them poor products that don't. I have a strong feeling that the story of Britain will be the story of Minnesota in a few years if this bill were to pass. This bill doesn't just stop there with the money I said. There's a lot of money being spent. But we have $5 million from the general fund and $12,455,000 from the RDA for electric vehicle rebates of $2,500 for lease of purchase of a new vehicle and $500 for lease of a purchase of a used vehicle. Okay, so we can't cut Social Security taxes, right? So we can't really do that because who does that benefit? Supposedly, it benefits the wealthy old people, okay? But we are going to give them rebate money subsidizing the wealthy for an EV car. Now, does that make any sense to you? Absolutely not. To me, it does not. So we want to give millionaires rebates to buy EV vehicles, but goodness gracious, we can't cut Social Security taxes. And then, of course, we've got the mandates to drive up energy costs. You know, the utilities are not going to eat the mandate costs. They're going to pass it on to users, like myself, like yourself. We will be paying more, which is probably why they've got an increase there for the program for energy assistance. Fantastic. Okay. So we have $500,000 from the general fund and $500,000 from the RDA to grant awards up to $40,000 to auto dealers seeking certification from EV manufacturers. $5 million from the general fund and $5 million from the RDA to grants to local units of government for solar installations on public buildings. Man, those public buildings are going to look so amazing with solar freaking panels on them. Amazing. Let's skip a lot around some spending here, and we come to a $7 million from the general fund and $7 million from the RDA for grants to school districts or school transportation providers to subsidize the deployment of electric school buses. Once again, I want you to think back to all the children that are digging in the dirt and in the soil and mining the materials, breathing in the toxic chemicals, subpar living standards, low wages, if any wages, no days off, contemplating suicide, so that they can get the materials in order to make or have the materials for the electric buses. They will never get an education. But you want them working so that you have a school bus. $2,500,000 from the general fund and $2,500,000 from the RDA to subsidize electric panel upgrades for low-income households in a single-family residences and multi-family residential buildings. Crazy. Members, it would not be complete if I did not talk on the energy bill without reading some of the headlines. So I'm going to read these headlines, and I want you to think. G7 fails to set deadline for coal phase out. We have, net zero push will raise costs of flights, warn airlines. Has anybody even right now checked prices of airlines? Right now it's expensive to fly anywhere. Imagine what net zero is going to do. But that's the plan, right? They don't want you traveling anywhere. Only the rich and the famous will be able to afford to get on their private jets. And us plebes will be sent to our 15-minute cities, biking around and not going too many places. Because we won't even be able to have an electric vehicle. That's a whole nother conversation. All right, so then we have the Ross Clark from the Daily Telegraph. The green agenda has become an embarrassing failure. Janet Daly from the Daily Telegraph. The push for net zero has become a handy excuse to rip us off. Well, I would agree with that because this bill right now in front of us is a handy bill that's ripping us off. Members, this bill, as I stated in my opening comments, makes life more expensive for Minnesotans. Vote no.
I recognize the member from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's been a lot said tonight. And when I was thinking about what to say, it was actually kind of funny. I was on my way back here to the Capitol after our break there. And of course, I'm turning off a Shepherd, and I got stuck at a train for 20 minutes. Now, I was immediately a little upset, but then I thought to myself, I have an opportunity. In the middle of this omnibus bill session where everything's moving so fast and we're all talking so much and so much is going on, I had 20 minutes of peace and quiet to think about what I was going to say tonight. And that gave me a lot of pause. So what I came to the conclusion on is there's a really big bill in front of us that compiles a lot of things. It's 452 pages long, dozens and dozens of provisions, and millions of dollars. And a lot of that has been talked about tonight, so I'm not going to go back and revisit all that. I want to thank a lot of my colleagues who went through and mentioned a lot of those things. However, almost everything we've heard tonight in these bills, whether it be through the amendments, whether it be through some of the provisions that were explained, isn't accomplishing one of the key pillars of government. And when I mean key pillars of government, I was reminded of it when I looked up on the wall above the rostrum tonight. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So to provide life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is our key role in government. So this bill today should be delivering affordability, reliability, and security. But this bill does the opposite. It creates more policy that's going to dictate how a family, a small business, or a state has to do something. From producing our energy to environmental permits, all of the rules and regulations that are going to be added in these bills today give uncertainty to how we are going to accomplish those two things, affordability and reliability and security. The bill today treats Minnesota like it's a bubble amongst everything else, where everything, as soon as we cross the border and go to Iowa, South Dakota, Wisconsin, or even up to Canada, that doesn't matter. What happens here in Minnesota matters. That's not how we need to be looking at things. Our energy future and environmental futures are linked together. And I've said it before and I want to say it again, the best way to create a better society that's delivering people that life, liberty, and that pursuit of happiness is by lifting people out of poverty, by giving them lower energy rates. It's well documented around the world that if we decrease the price of power and you put more spending power into people's pockets, they'll be allowed to lift themselves out of poverty, start creating generational wealth, and in doing so, they'll actually consume less power. So instead of using old sources of heating, whether it be coal or fuel oil or even just burning wood in a hut, if they have access to affordable electricity, they'll be lifted out of poverty. And when they're lifted out of poverty, they're going to limit their carbon footprint. In fact, if you really evaluate, and we bring this all back to what the big scary word is, which is carbon, some of the places that emit the most carbon, that have the largest carbon footprint, are the people that live in the most extreme poverty, with the highest rates of energy that is not reliable and that is not affordable. Now, the next part that this bill doesn't address is the actual solution. Now, I've heard tonight about how this bill is the solution. This is the solution. I've been hearing it all session. It's really, really easy to write a bill and say, look, I found the solution, it's right here. But unfortunately, the bill in front of us today just offers a solution with no steps in the equation on how to get there. There's no conversation about how we're actually going to be able to build out. A lot of members have talked today about how we're going to need to mine everything to have the energy secured. We're going to need to, make sure we invest in a robust forest industry to be able to keep sequestering carbon, replanting forests, keep forests healthy, and keep our society healthy. We're not going to be able to manufacture or sustain anything because we're reliant on ships and planes to bring everything from around the world so Minnesota can activate the solution that's on the table in front of us today. That is not leading. That is not the way to do something. And we've had the solution staring us in the face for almost 200 years here in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota has built itself upon its natural resources and its people. We have always risen to the challenges in front of us and delivered not only for our neighbors, but for our country and for our world. We built city skylines, we built the railroads, we won world wars, and we've delivered life-saving technologies that all came right here from Minnesotan men and women who built out a nation and did that with our natural resources and our intuitions. We have proven it first here in Minnesota that we have what is necessary to do so. Whether you're up in my district in a city like Nashwauk or Keewatin, or down here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the issues remain the same. We have to unlock the ability for Minnesotans to really deliver what is exactly on that wall. Have the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to do so. This bill today will be shackling them. Now is the chance for us to really be leaders. That word is talked a lot around here. And we can do that if we change this bill. I'm going to urge everyone in here today to vote no on this bill, to send it back and make the changes that are necessary to unlock environmental permitting that works for the Minnesotan business, to unlock regulations and free market goals that allow all of our energy producers in the state to do so, that's attaining the goals that the people want, while remembering that we need to have affordable and reliable power so that people can excel. We can lift up all Minnesotans and deliver the leadership for the world of tomorrow, whether that be building out solar, wind, nuclear, carbon capture, biomass. All of these things can be done and initiated here in Minnesota if we enact the right policy. But that requires us to come back to the table together and have conversations that get into the equation rather than talking about offering a solution. It means being advocates for the issue and working together and not being clouded by the activists that are around us. And that is something I believe we can all do together. So with that, I will be voting no for the bill today. I hope others will do the same. And let's do this right so Minnesota can be the beacon it has been for almost 200 years, can lead our country, can lead our world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today in favor of House File 2310 because this bill addresses so much about what I love about Minnesota. Our environment, our natural resources, our climate, maybe not our climate when it snows in April, but I do love Minnesota a lot, and I really love this bill. But tonight, I do want to focus on Minnesota's water and the plants, animals, and humans who rely on that water for life. And hint members, that is all of us. That's all of our constituents. That's all of the plants and animals in your districts and mine. And yes, members, I'm also giving a fishing speech tonight, like so many of you, because I'm lucky to represent the Mississippi River. This is a river I have lived on my entire life. This is a river that has sustained my life with water, food, family, and recreation opportunities. I remember fishing on right below the Lock and Dam with my dad and my brother as a kid. And while we caught all sorts of bass, walleye, and panfish, the fish that maybe made the most impact on me was the bighead buffalo. I liked them the best because the ones that were right before the particular Lock and Dam that I grew up on were huge. They were the prettiest, silver, they glittered, and they had giant, really weird eyes. They also fought just hard enough that I could reel them in, but they were still fun to catch. But we used to call bigmouth buffalo rough fish. But they weren't rough fish in the 90s, and they aren't rough fish now. What I didn't know back then were that these bigmouth buffalo are an integral part of our river ecosystem. They're North America's largest sucker species. They're both prey and predator. Native mussels rely on their gills for reproduction. And now their survival is at risk if we don't act and put better scientific management practices in place. What's really rough isn't the fish, it's our fish statutes. And House File 2310 addresses the lack of scientific fish management and will help ensure the survival of bigmouth buffalo, redfish, and all native fish in Minnesota. With this bill, the DNR will work to identify how we can bring science into our fish statutes and management and tell us how the legislature can do our jobs and better protect our native fish. This bill does go after the non-native fish species as well. Minnesota has been investing in the University of Minnesota's Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center for over a decade now, but we haven't put that into practice. And this year we invest an additional $6.6 million to give us factual data to manage AIS. We're relying on science to avoid making guesses based on anecdotes, hopes, prayers, or Boy Scout data collection projects. We are investing an additional $26.56 million in AIS, or aquatic invasive species, management. This will protect our rivers, streams, and thousands of lakes across the state. So why are we doing this? Well, we know our fish matter, not just for their sake or our ecosystem's sake. Fish aren't just a great accessory for our Tinder profile pictures. Fish are an indicator of the health of the water that gives us life. If the water's bad for fish, it's bad for us. The water can harm fish, it can harm us. And yes, if the water can kill fish, it can kill us too. Which is why our bill also strengthens our state's response to fish kills, with the inclusion of my bill, House File 81. We're increasing public awareness and response to these events. Fish kills are a mass die-off of fish in a body of water. They're uncommon, but they are an indicator of something wrong. And this bill outlines how our state agencies respond and report on these fish kills to the public, requiring reporting on the cause of a fish kill, and how the state will notify all of us, Minnesotans, of potential hazards to their health. This is a right-to-know bill. And when something is killing the fish, we all need to take note, because it impacts our health and our constituents' health too. I started this speech by sharing a story about my dad and I catching fish on the Mississippi, and I want to end by talking about another dad who fishes with his daughter. I got to know Tyler Winter this year much better. He's the director of Native Fish for Tomorrow, and he fishes for red horse with his daughter, and you can even see a picture of her and a red horse, which is another native fish that we are not currently protecting in Minnesota, even though it's being protected in Wisconsin, to talk about where we're an island and where we're an oasis. And he talked about his dream of his daughter continuing to catch these red horse and caring about native fish when she's an adult. And I think a lot about that environment that Tyler's daughter is going to inherit from us. And by voting green, we can ensure that she and all of Minnesota's children will live in a state where they can swim in our lakes and eat the fish they catch in those streams. And when you vote green, you're voting for clean air to breathe and clean parks for people to play in. I'm also thinking about I'm thinking about Amara too, and her dad, Michael, who are right above me here in the gallery. And they should have a future together, but they don't. And to the whole Strandy family, I'm devastated for you. I'm glad that we're working on this bill for you. You know the voice that Amara had, and that voice is reflected in House File 2310. And then tonight, members, you are voting to make sure that future members, or that future generations do not worry about PFAS creating cancer cultures or cancer clusters at their school. As you vote tonight, I want you to think about the future deer hunters, the future scientists, and the future outdoor recreationists. I want you to think about your future and the environment that they are going to inherit. I'm proud to vote green tonight for the Mississippi and the sort of river that I want to leave for our children. And I hope you'll join me. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Roseau, Representative Burkle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've spent a long time tonight listening to a lot of members talk about the impacts of this bill. I'm not going to reiterate everything that's already been said. I will say that Representative Backer and Representative Schultz concerns about the drainage work group and how they're being bypassed right now with this drainage registry portal language is very concerning to me as well. I received numerous calls this last couple months as this language is moving through, and the stakeholders involved need to be heard, and it's disappointing that we bypassed the work group. The drainage work group has developed several sets of consensus recommendations to update Chapter 103 drainage law. I don't know why we'd bypass them now to pass this drainage registry portal. Following a consensus process would accomplish what this bill will not accomplish, a long-term fix for all the stakeholders. It's really disappointing that this provision has made it into the bill, and I'm hopeful that in conference committee it will get taken out. Beyond that, I'd like to talk about another work group that specifically affects the folks up in my district. I'm the only member in this chamber who actually has active elk herds in the district, and it's very disappointing that another work group is being bypassed. In a sense, the elk management plan is being stricken from the bill, and if you go to, and I know we're all looking at the bill, but if you go to page 227, you'll see Kitson, Roseau, Marshall, and Beltrami counties The commissioner mentioned in here, the commissioner must not manage an elk herd in those counties in a manner that would increase the size of the herd, including adoption or implementation of an elk management plan designed to increase the elk herd if depredation damages have gone up for 2 years in a row. That's happened, members. I know we talked earlier about the wolf amendment that was added to the bill tonight, which is concerning to me as well. But the depredation numbers on the elk herd up there has been astronomical the last few years. And we got farmers putting up new fences, elk depredation problems in fields, soybean fields, and it's costing us money. And I know, maybe economic activity to the folks across the aisle is driving north to have someone serve them a cup of coffee when they head back to the cities. They forget about northern Minnesota. But the folks in my district, they rely on that money if they're farming up there. And the fact that we're going to bypass and strike out this language in the bill is very frustrating to me. Section C of the bill talks about holding joint public meetings. I don't understand why the transparency is not something we'd all be working for. I'm hopeful that part of the bill will be stricken as well in conference committee. Beyond that, members, and I'll wrap things up quick because I told Rep. Davids I would. But beyond that, this climate and energy portion of the bill, as many of the members have outlined, are just damaging to the people of this state who grow our food and provide our jobs. We're looking at record spending, as Representative Franson mentioned, and imposing more costly mandates on taxpayers, homeowners, housing providers. I don't understand why we continue to drive job creators out of Minnesota. And I don't understand why we're increasing taxes and fees with this monumental surplus. And since Representative Keel is not here tonight, that she's still back home in district, I want to remind everybody that the reason we don't have a soybean meal processing plant going up in Crookston is because of a delay in air permits. We're losing businesses across the border. Our border communities are suffering. And now we're seeing annual or state park fees increase at our parks, watercraft fees increasing, fishing license fees increasing. I have constituents in northwest Minnesota, that are specifically in Marshall County, that are extremely frustrated as they watch their old Mill State Park just fall into disarray for lack of proper maintenance. All this money, and it's not, I can tell you, it's not moving north. So once again, this bill will have a damaging impact on the people who produce food in this country and those who provide our jobs, and it's irresponsible and it's unsustainable, unless, of course, one has little respect for the taxpayers who foot the bill. Members, vote no on this bill.
Further discussion to House File 2310. I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Speaker. Members, we're winding down. I know you're all waiting for that. Representative Hansen, we've certainly gone through quite the session, and there's some things that we like about the bill. There's some things that we don't like about the bill. I especially liked the amendment that we led with today. But beyond that, there's a lot of stuff that we don't like. If this bill, no question, makes life more expensive for Minnesotans, driving up energy bills, costs, from fishing licenses to boat fees. This bill spends $670 million above base. That is a historic number. And I wish that I could say that this was stuff that I really appreciated, but there's stuff in here to fund everything from flying squirrels to snot rocks, according to one of our spreadsheets. So, quite honestly, there's some challenges here. I'm going to quickly share a story, members. That's a political term, I think, in the chamber tonight, quickly. I'm just going to go ahead and share a story. I'll leave it at that. I'll use my daughter for an example. She just turned 18. So last year, she was well on her way with her first job, and she's looking at her tax statement this last week and withholdings in her check. And 17 years old last year, 18 this year. She paid almost $9,000 cumulatively in taxes. She's 17, almost $9,000. That's before sales tax, Representative Chaw. Yeah. I don't understand why we are going back into the taxpayer's pocket and saying, you need to pay more. My daughter Kelly, she's got a couple of paddle boards, a couple of canoes for duck hunting. She's got a worn-out jet ski that she likes to use. She's paying more for her fishing license, more for her turkey license, which she was in the blind just yesterday. My daughter Kelly, she's paying more for her small game license, more for her deer license, her state duck stamp, her federal tax stamp might not be going up, but her deer tag is going up. After $9,000 in taxes, Democrats are saying to my daughter, you didn't pay enough, you got to pay more. This might be, in my opinion, the potentially worst environment bill that has ever been seen on the House floor. Representative Hansen, I have bookmarked every line, and we could very easily be here a long time tonight. I'm not going to do that. But there's been a lot of comments made about some great things in this bill, and quite honestly, I don't know what to say as a GOP lead in this committee in this subject area as I hear some of the comments. I'm hearing $28 million for, it's called district energy years ago. I don't know what it's called today. But there's a huge problem there. My friends on the other side of the aisle, I don't think you're solving the problem by subsidizing energy in St. Paul to the tune of $28 million. That's in this bill. What are we doing? This bill grows government exponentially, gives more power to MPCA, reaches out into greater Minnesota and says, here's how you're going to operate your businesses. Here's how we're going to regulate you. You're taking away the ability of counties to make decisions for themselves when it comes to the state coming in and buying land? Are you kidding me? This is not a good bill, Representative Hansen. This bill is going after agriculture in a way that I don't know that any other environment bill ever has. Agriculture is not the enemy, but we're treating agriculture like the enemy in this bill. Sometimes when I've been engaged with a number of folks in agriculture, they ask, it feels like there's a war on agriculture in Minnesota, like farmers are the problem. Farmers are not the problem, but they feel like they are. I was looking at the increased fees for those folks that are in an area where they need irrigation to operate, and they have to make a decision between, do I go over my permit by a small amount or do I let my entire crop fail? Democrats are increasing fees for those farmers exponentially. Why are we doing that? With a $17.5 billion surplus, it hasn't been said enough. We're going after kids like my daughter who wants to go out, hunt some ducks, some fish, go deer hunting. She's not paying enough in taxes because she has to pay for this bill. So we raise fees and raise taxes in Minnesota, making energy more expensive, making the outdoors more expensive, inaccessible, and unobtainable in some situations where people just don't have the money anymore to pay for this stuff. I hope the bill comes back better from conference committee because this bill is a disappointment, members.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, it has been a long night, or day, afternoon, evening. I appreciate all of the good debate and the respectful dialogue, and I will just say that I am proud to have worked on this bill. This is the first year I haven't been on the Environment Committee, and so it feels somewhat fitting that the Environment Committee and the Climate and Energy Bill are combined in this bill. But anyway, this is a bill that's for the future. Vote green.
I recognize a member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. You know, the time is ripe. The time is now. You know, as a good conversation happens oftentimes in the middle of the night, the ideas that have been put forth by the majority really can be told really by two letters. I just received a letter from the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. They do not support this bill. And I just received another letter from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, from our Commissioner, Katrina Kessler. Appreciate your service. And I believe that she supports the bill. Well, you know, there's a tale of two letters, folks. There's a tale of two letters. And, you know, I was reminded when thinking of the bills tonight, you know, I don't watch a whole lot of television, but when I have my kids come up and join me, you've seen them out here on the House floor and on the hallways in committee. And, you know, oftentimes, Dad, you know, their highlight of their weekend is hanging out with me or during the week, and we watch some television. And one of the shows that we saw just the other night was a show, I don't know if you want to raise your hand if you've ever seen the show, it's called Wipeout. Anyone have seen the show Wipeout? It's kind of a game where these folks are volunteer to go up and there's water, water underneath, and they've got these big mechanical things with punching things and twirly things, and it, you know, generically just kind of beats the snot out of you. And then the announcers, are kind of standing in the background, and as someone kind of just gets beat up and covered with mud and thrown in the water and beat down generally and feel bad about themselves, laugh and giggle. And that's pretty much the show. Well, I can tell you the environment bill that we have deals with water, deals with punching, deals with a lot of issues when it comes to business that reminds me quite a bit of that show Wipeout. If you take a moment or two, I won't be real long, you can Google it and watch an episode or two. If you laugh, I'd imagine you're probably watching it. But that show is funny. The bills before us tonight, as Representative Hansen and others have said, are not funny. They really, truly take it out, take their frustrations out on folks that are job creators in this state. And that's a disappointment. Minnesotans, legislature, we can do better. The other bill is the environment bill, the energy bill that came before us. And a few days ago, they were joined together in unholy matrimony in Ways and Means. And I was thinking about that show. And that bill, what does that remind you of? And, you know, while Wipeout is a show that you can see today on television, there's a show that I remember seeing years ago in my youth. And the lead actor in that show was called a comedian named Richard Pryor. And he played the part of a fellow by the name of Montgomery Brewster. If you remember Montgomery Brewster, the show was called Brewster's Millions. And Brewster's was a washed-up baseball player who washed his way out of the major leagues. And his job, when he found out his uncle died, was to figure out how in the world can I blow $30 million in 30 days. And the prize, if I blow $30 million in 30 days, you know, you couldn't tell people, you couldn't spend it on yourself, you had all these different rules. But you won $300 million from his uncle. That, my friends, is what we do. Rather than give these dollars back to the people, the businesses, the families, the single mothers who spent their hard-earned dollars to build these accounts up, Rather than give those dollars back so that we can buy down and push their energy costs down in a real meaningful way, we decided, you know what? Let's be Brewster's Millions and let's spend it all. That's what we did tonight. That's what we're doing tonight. I would ask, maybe have a little courage, vote no. Be a good move. We can come together. What I'd like to see, if we could come together, is we get these two letters to both support a bill, not just one. Representative Schultz talked a bit about creating uncertainty for business and the damage that that's going to cause for our state when it comes to regulatory oversight, when it comes to bureaucrats that are unelected breathing down our throats as business people in rural and in the metro, and what that does. That's scary. That's really scary. But you know who didn't? You know who don't? I can remember in committee, it was one of the testifiers saying, you know, we're asking for these mandates for solar so that we can have market certainty. Wouldn't that be nice? I'm a business owner who talks about how great my product does, but I want to just make darn sure that I have market certainty. What's that mean? What does market certainty mean? It means the government's going to mandate you buy the stuff that I'm selling. There's an episode of Simpsons from a few years back where a sick salesman comes into town and he does a little dance and song and talks the city into saying, you know what, folks? This city's up and coming. You know what you need? Is a monorail. That's for tomorrow, folks. Vote no tonight.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I ask you to vote yes for the bill. Why? You know, I've actually listened to much of the debate tonight, and I'm struck by a few things. I'm struck by the sense of fear. Fear of what climate change is doing, fear of economic disruption, fear of what's in our bodies. Actually, I think those are all things we should be sharing, these concerns and that fear. But what do we have an opportunity to do? We can wallow in that fear. We can keep repeating it, reinvigorating it, feeding that fear. And I heard a lot of that feeding of fear. I've heard a lot of this fear year after year, the same debates, the same discussions, the same concerns, the same crises. I ask you to vote for this bill to put aside that fear of the unknown, the fear of what climate change is doing to us, the fear of the things we cannot see, like PFAS, or neonicotinoids, or microplastics. I ask you to put aside that fear because what we're trying to do in the bill is address that fear, address those problems. You know, 2 generations ago, the whole country and the world looked at our state and they thought that we could solve problems and that this was a great place to live. They looked at Wendell Anderson holding up that fish. I want them to look at that fish again and not worry about whether they can eat it. And if we do that, if we improve our state so that our air and our water and our food and our soil are the best in the Midwest, not an island but an oasis that brings people here, that brings people to our state and invest in this state and builds in this state, people will come. They'll come for the quality. That's the quality that drew many people here. It's the quality that was here for the people who were originally here. It's the quality we have a responsibility to maintain. So I ask you to vote for this bill, to make our state better, to work on solving those problems. And do we agree on all of our solutions? No, we do not. But I'm asking us to put aside the fears that we have. Put aside that fear and look at what we can do. Look at the research we've invested in, the science we believe in, the science we maybe don't believe in, but the science that's in front of us. I ask you to vote yes for our future and for this great environment and energy bill.
I recognize the member from Stearns, the Minority Leader, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And tonight, members, I just want to be clear in this chamber that Republicans want energy that is clean and affordable. And Mr. Speaker, would Representative Acom yield for a question?
Representative Acom will yield for a question. Representative Demuth.
We've heard a lot of debate tonight. We've heard a lot of hours on this bill, but there's a couple of things that I just want clarified, Representative Acom. Drawing your attention to Article 11, Section 5, Subdivision 4, actually starting on line 311.21. My question is, will the cost recovery provision in this section increase the cost for ratepayers?
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
It's kind of late. Could you repeat those pages, please?
Yep, yes. So line...
I recognize the member from Stearns, the Minority Leader, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Acom, the line is 311.21. And then the question is, will the cost recovery provision in this section increase cost for ratepayers?
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It really has been a long day. So the provision that you're talking about is the electric vehicles and the rebates or the infrastructure for the utility to put in infrastructure. So by definition, for them to be able to recover it from ratepayers, yes, it will raise rates.
Representative Demuth.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Acom, for that clarification. That is how I was reading the bill, and I wanted to make sure we had that right. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Acom yield for another question?
Representative Acom will yield for another question. Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Acom, in Section 6, so just below that, I wrote down the lines because it was actually getting late. So looking at, starting at line 312.8, actually my question is going to be on 317.22. The electric school bus program allows utilities to earn a rate of return and allows the PUC to approve new tariff mechanisms. So my question is, Representative Acom, will this part of the bill increase costs for Minnesota ratepayers?
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What these provisions, both with expanding electric vehicles and expanding electric school buses, are going to do is improve our environment, not only for kids in school buses, but for the ability to be able to drive electric cars and the improvements that that will have for all of us. So we can look at the cost of our changing climate and the cost that we pay in increased insurance premiums every year, the cost that we pay in increased disaster relief that we pay every year, and we can compare that to potential costs in rates, and the overall impact is going to be savings if we're investing and being proactive and addressing our climate crisis.
Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And from that answer, Representative Acom, I think that it is going to increase those costs, and I appreciate the additional information that you gave. I have one last question, Mr. Speaker, if Representative Acom would yield for one last question.
Representative Acom will yield for one last question. Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Acom, Article 12, and the line is 333.7, the energy storage. I think we're excited about the potential of that technology. I think we can all agree on that. But Representative Acom, can you tell me where that technology is today and how much energy are we able to store right now?
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Energy storage is an emerging technology, as you point out. Energy storage in today's world is more about 4 hours, I think, is what the batteries can last. But we have new technology that is coming out that is being worked on with Xcel Energy, Great River, that will be lasting upwards of 100 hours. And so energy storage will be the bridge to helping to ensure that renewable energy can be reliable, much more reliable long-term than it is today.
Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Acom, for that answer. What I want the chamber to understand and the public that may still be watching or listening, earlier this year, Xcel did announce battery storage project in Colorado. The Colorado Sun described this as a massive battery array the size of a football field. And I'm not sure if anybody's read this, but I'm very interested in how many megawatts would this project actually produce? The answer is 10. Size of a football field, it can store 10 megawatts. Yet this bill, and for anyone that's still looking at the bill on line 331.19, this bill wants utilities to achieve 3,000 megawatt battery storage. So the Colorado project is the size of a football field, requiring utilities to acquire enough material, land, etc., to cover 300 football fields with battery storage will be an extremely expensive proposition. Those costs, thanks to this bill, will be passed down to the ratepayers. So we know, just from these few questions, this bill will drive up energy costs for Minnesota families. That is a fact. Worse, the battery storage requires massive amounts of lithium, cobalt, nickel, and who right now is going to benefit from that but China and Russia? And why? Because Democrats refuse to let us mine these minerals here in Minnesota, where we could do it safe. So members, this bill, again, before us, is expensive and it is unaffordable. The environmental portion raises millions of dollars in fees on Minnesotans when we have a $19 billion surplus. The new mandates and energy provisions we discussed previously are going to result in an increase on everyone's energy bills, on every single ratepayer. This bill grows government, a 513% increase over base in general fund spending in the energy area, and a 2,286% increase for the renewable development account. So right now, in the economy that we are living in, Democrats are raising billions of dollars in taxes in other parts of your budget and using it to fund these green projects and mandates that will threaten the reliability of our energy grid and result in higher energy bills for Minnesota families. And I want to be clear again that Republicans do not oppose making our energy cleaner or renewable. We do not oppose that. But we differ in one area. Republicans want energy that's clean and affordable. Democrats want energy that's clean no matter what the cost to Minnesota families, even if it results in higher electric bills. So members, I'm urging a no vote tonight because Minnesotans are paying enough already. Minnesotans are not asking for millions in fee increases. Minnesotans are not asking us to make their energy costs more expensive, especially when we have a $19 billion surplus. Members, this bill is not a win. Vote no.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had a long debate. The tens of Minnesotans still watching from home, thank you so much for sticking with us. Minnesotans care about our environment. We value our clean air, our clean water, and our clean land. And we care about climate change. In fact, it's a top 5 issue for Minnesota voters. So this is an important bill for our state and for Minnesotans. And I want to start by thanking Chair Hansen for his leadership and his hard work on the environmental provisions of this bill. The Minnesota House of Representatives is about to pass the largest investment ever in our environment in our state's history. We also know that prevention is better than cleanup, and DFLers are working to prevent PFAS pollution by adopting water quality standards and banning non-essential PFAS uses in a variety of products while also cleaning up landfills and ensuring clean drinking water for all Minnesotans. From wild deer to pollinators, this bill protects our state's wildlife by addressing threats like chronic wasting disease, emerald ash borer, and aquatic invasive species, and restoring our natural habitat for future generations. I also want to thank Chair Acom for the incredible energy bill. We've heard a lot about cost tonight, and while I have good news for you, renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy that we can buy in Minnesota. In fact, cheaper than coal, cheaper than natural gas. And this bill makes really important investments in renewable energy and also would save Minnesotans money by putting the first ever investments in state dollars in weatherization to make sure that we are weatherizing homes for low-income Minnesotans to keep their costs down. We are also, in this bill, paying for panel upgrades to make sure that our Minnesotans can take advantage of electrification, which is going to be cheaper for them in many cases. And we've heard tonight about markets, and well, why can't we just let the market take care of this? Well, there's this thing called externalities in economics, which means that there are costs that the markets don't account for, and that comes up most often in the environment and energy space. It doesn't account as a market for the 2,000 deaths a year in the metro that are caused by air pollution. It doesn't account for the impacts on the most vulnerable communities in our state and communities of color. And there are provisions in this bill, like the Climate Finance Authority, that will help make sure we are investing in programs and job-creating opportunities in our state that will help reduce air pollution. It will help with storage, with the iron air batteries and other forms of batteries that are cutting edge, that are going to be able to lead our state to 100% clean energy. And we've also heard about the need to give back to Minnesotans. And well, I've got good news for you there too. We are saving money for your schools through solar in schools. That's the second highest cost for schools, is their energy usage. And we're saving money for consumers for rebates with heat pumps and rebates for electric vehicles. We're also creating good jobs in solar, weatherization, and energy efficiency. So members, today we have the opportunity to pass a bill that will transform our ability to respond to the climate crisis and the many threats we face to our land, air, and water. So to keep Minnesotan living in a great place for generations to come, I urge you to vote green today. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on House File 2310.
Oh, sorry. We're just going to leave you there. He doesn't use the speaker's voice. Members, please vote.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 59 nays, the bill is passed as amended in its title agreed to.